They called him hopeless, a boy born into luxury but trapped in silence. Doctors gave up. Therapists failed. Even his billionaire father stopped believing a miracle was possible. But then, a humble maid, the one everyone ignored, the one they looked down upon because of her color, did something no one could explain. In her trembling hands, she held a small, strange object, and within seconds, the impossible unfolded before their eyes. What she revealed didn't just change one child's life, it shattered years of arrogance, prejudice, and disbelief. Stay till the end, because this isn't just a story about hearing sound. It's about finally hearing the truth. Subscribe now and join us as we uncover stories that awaken hearts and challenge injustice. In a mansion of glass and gold, where silence echoed louder than laughter, lived Ethan, a 7-year-old boy born deaf. His father, Richard Harlow, a self-made millionaire, had everything money could buy, except the one thing he wanted most: his son's voice. Day after day, specialists came and went, doctors from across the world, expensive machines, and endless treatments. Nothing worked. Hope slowly turned into frustration, and frustration hardened into pride. Richard buried his pain beneath meetings, power, and the illusion of control. Then one morning, a new maid joined their staff. Grace, a quiet black woman with kind eyes and a calm presence. No one paid her much attention. The head butler whispered, "She's just another one from the agency." But there was something about the way she looked at Ethan, not with pity, but with understanding. While others avoided Ethan's silence, Grace began to sit beside him. She would smile, draw pictures, and hum songs he couldn't hear, but somehow felt. Slowly, Ethan began to respond, his little fingers tracing her lips, his eyes bright with curiosity. Richard watched from a distance, confused and skeptical. What could this woman possibly offer that the world's best doctors couldn't? Still, something about her quiet confidence unsettled him, until one fateful afternoon, when Grace asked permission to try something different. She reached into her old cloth bag and pulled out something mysterious, small, wooden, and handcrafted. The room fell silent as everyone watched, unsure if this was madness or a miracle waiting to happen. The Reynolds mansion stood tall on the hill, a palace of marble and glass that gleamed under the morning sun. But behind its beauty lay a haunting silence that no laughter, no music, no voice could ever fill. That silence belonged to Ethan Reynolds, the only son of billionaire Charles Reynolds, born completely deaf. Doctors from around the world had visited him since birth. Specialists from Germany, miracle workers from Japan, and surgeons from New York, but all left shaking their heads. "He will never hear," they said. "His world will always be silent." Those words broke his mother years ago, and even though his father tried to fill their world with wealth and comfort, nothing could heal the silence that surrounded Ethan's heart. Then, one rainy morning, when the mansion was hiring new staff, a young woman named Clara appeared at the door. She wasn't like the others. No fancy clothes, no fake smiles, just calm eyes that seemed to see more than anyone else. The head butler hesitated. "We usually hire people with references." But before he could say more, Ethan appeared at the staircase watching her curiously. Clara smiled softly and waved at him, not with pity, but with warmth. Ethan smiled back, something he hadn't done in months. Mr. Reynolds, watching from his office window, decided at that moment, she stays. Days turned into weeks. Clara worked quietly, cleaning the halls, preparing breakfast and taking care of Ethan's needs. But there was something strange about her, something the staff couldn't ignore. Around her neck hung a small silver key, and in her bag, she carried a small wooden box. One she never opened, one she never let out of her sight. One afternoon, Ethan's tutor noticed something odd. The boy, who usually ignored all attempts to engage him, was suddenly more alert, more alive. He began drawing circles of light, waves, and a strange symbol he had never seen before. When asked where he learned it, Ethan simply pointed at Clara. Rumors began to spread among the mansion workers. "Did you see the box glow last night?" One whispered. "I swear, I saw her whisper something. And the candles flickered," another said. But Clara ignored them all. Her focus was only Ethan. Each evening she sat with him by the window as the rain pattered on the glass. She would hum softly, even though she knew he couldn't hear. And yet, each time she hummed, Ethan's eyes would flutter, his hands would tremble, as if he could feel something new inside him. Something stirring. One night, as thunder roared above and the mansion plunged into darkness, Ethan woke to find Clara standing in his room, holding that wooden box. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. "Ethan," she mouthed slowly, knowing he couldn't hear. "It's time." She opened the box. Inside lay a golden pendant, glowing faintly as if alive. She placed it gently around his neck and closed her eyes, whispering something in a language lost to time. The pendant pulsed once, twice, and then shone bright like lightning. Ethan gasped. A small broken sound escaped his lips. For the first time in his life he heard the storm, the rain, his own heartbeat. Tears rolled down Clara's cheeks as Ethan cried. Not in silence, but in the sound of his own voice. The impossible had happened. But the true secret of who Clara really was, and what price she had paid for this miracle, was yet to be revealed. The mansion was still trembling from the last echo of thunder. The light from the golden pendant flickered across the walls like living fire. Ethan clutched his chest, tears streaming down his face, his mouth open in disbelief. He could hear. "Ethan!" his father shouted, bursting through the door. "Son, can you hear me?" Ethan turned, trembling, and whispered the first word of his life. "Dad." The word broke through the air like a miracle. Charles froze. For a moment he couldn't breathe. His lips quivered, his eyes filled with tears. He dropped to his knees beside his son, pulling him into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. But amidst that miracle, Clara stood silently, her face pale, her hands pressed tightly together. The glow of the pendant was fading, its light pulsing slower, weaker. "Clara!" Charles gasped, turning toward her. How did you do this?" She hesitated. "It wasn't me, sir," she whispered softly. It was him. His heart was ready to hear. But as she spoke, her body began to shake. The butler, who had rushed in behind, noticed something terrifying. The veins in her hands were glowing faintly with the same golden light as the pendant. "Miss Clara, your hands," he shouted. Clara looked down and smiled through her tears. "It's the price," she said quietly. The gift had to come from somewhere. Charles looked horrified. "What do you mean, price?" Clara's voice trembled as she sank to her knees. "The pendant was my mother's. She was a healer. From a village far from here, she once saved a child's voice by giving up her own. When she passed, she left this to me and told me to use it only when a pure soul's silence was meant to end." Ethan, still crying, clutched her hand. "Don't go," he pleaded. His small voice echoed through the storm outside, the sound both new and heartbreaking. She smiled at him, brushing his hair gently. "I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. You just keep listening to the world now. Listen to your father's laughter, to the wind, to the love that surrounds you." Charles was speechless. A billionaire who had spent millions chasing miracles now, watching one unfold before his eyes and realizing it wasn't science or wealth that healed his son. It was sacrifice. The pendant dimmed completely now. Clara's head tilted, her eyes fluttering closed as the last trace of golden light left her body. But before anyone could panic, she breathed in deeply, still alive, but weak. "Why help us?" Charles finally asked, his voice shaking. "You could have gone anywhere. You could have sold that magic, and lived rich." Clara opened her eyes and whispered faintly, "Because when I was a child, no one helped me. People looked at me and saw only color, not pain. I promised myself, if I ever had the power to change one child's world, I would." Silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was powerful, healing. Charles held Ethan close, then turned to Clara, tears streaking his face. You didn't just give my son his hearing. You gave me my heart back." As dawn broke through the storm clouds, the first rays of sunlight spilled into the room. Clara smiled faintly as Ethan, for the first time, listened to the birds sing outside his window. The impossible had happened, not because of wealth, not because of science, but because of compassion and courage that transcended color, race, and class. In that moment, Charles Reynolds, a man who once believed money could buy anything, realized the truth. Some miracles can only be heard by the heart. Days passed after the miracle, but the echoes of that night remained etched in everyone's hearts. The mansion that once stood as a symbol of power and pride now felt alive, filled with gratitude, humility, and something far greater than wealth, humanity. Ethan recovered quickly, his laughter ringing through the grand hallways for the first time in his life. Every giggle, every question, every "I love you, Dad," carried the weight of a miracle that money could never buy. Charles watched his son with awe, realizing how silence had once surrounded not just Ethan, but his own heart, too. Clara, the humble maid who had changed everything, was still weak but healing. Every morning, Ethan would visit her with a handmade card or a single flower from the garden, thanking her in his small, tender voice. "You're my angel," he would say, and every time, she would smile through her tears. But not everyone had understood at first. The mansion staff, who once dismissed Clara because of her skin color, now stood in silent respect whenever she entered the room. The same people who once ignored her now whispered her name with admiration. She had not only saved Ethan, she had awakened something human in all of them. One evening, Charles called everyone to the living room. His voice trembled with emotion as he said, "For years, I believed my money could fix anything. But a woman I barely noticed, a woman this world too often looks down upon, showed me what true power looks like. Kindness, sacrifice, and love." He turned to Clara, holding out a sealed document. "You are no longer our maid, Clara. You're part of this family. And this foundation," he held up the document, "will bear your name. The Clara Hope Foundation will provide hearing aids, education, and care for children who can't afford it, regardless of color, background, or status." The room filled with applause and tears. Clara stood frozen, overwhelmed. "Sir, I didn't do it for this," she whispered softly. Charles smiled. "I know. That's why you deserve it." At that moment, Ethan ran forward and hugged her tightly. "I can hear because you listened," he said. His small arms wrapped around her neck like the most precious gift in the world. Outside, the evening sky glowed in shades of gold and crimson. The world seemed to whisper, a quiet truth, that miracles aren't found in power or privilege, but in the courage to care when no one else will. Months later, as the foundation began helping its first group of children, Clara stood beside Charles at the opening ceremony. Cameras flashed, reporters spoke her name, and yet her eyes were fixed on the children, laughing and talking freely, some hearing for the first time. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Charles leaned over and said quietly, "You changed my world. Clara, you taught me that love doesn't see color. It hears hearts." Clara smiled, and I learned that even in a loud world, silence has its purpose. It makes you truly listen. The crowd applauded. But it wasn't the sound that mattered. It was the unity behind it. Black, white, rich, poor, all standing together, celebrating a miracle born from compassion. And as Ethan stood between them, holding both their hands, the camera zoomed in on the three. A powerful image of love breaking barriers, of humanity defeating prejudice. The narrator's voice fades in. "In a world that often divides us by color and class, remember this. Real greatness isn't measured by what you own, but by how you treat those the world ignores. Respect has no price, compassion has no color, and love. Love is the language that every heart can hear."